So that sort of leads to my finding balance slide. And I kind of took this from some of the comments and exactly sort of this, what we're sort of wrestling with this a little bit in this conversation. And one thing is finding that time, teaching the reading strategies versus teaching the content area, and how do you marry the two together so that you don't feel like you're using up valuable time. And I think I would say don't be afraid to use the social studies text in reading. It sounds like, Tammy, you probably do, but just I think in general, don't be afraid to bring, a page from the social studies text into reading as a sample. Because, like Martha pointed out, a lot of times those vocabulary words have the definition in parentheses right after, so that's a great reminder for students if they come to a word that they don't understand. Well, keep reading, because often the definition will come after, particularly in an informational text or a textbook setup. And so that's just sort of that reminder for students to kind of keep reading and see if it gives them the answer to that definition, within the text. Reminding students to back up and reread, read aloud. I know, Tammy, I think you said in your response that you work in small groups and have students read together, and I think that's a great idea. They hear it, they can read it, they're working together on that. And the more times we expose them to the text, the better that is. And so if you think that in the morning, maybe during reading time, you bring the sample text in and you use that just specifically for a specific reading strategy, some small part of it. But then later in social studies, if you have your day divided up that way, later in social studies, perhaps then the students see this again and then they say, oh, that's familiar. They've already heard it. You talked about it in class. They had a reading strategy to kind of attack that text with, and then it makes them easier. And then they're getting exposed to that text more than once, and that will help those struggling readers by getting that repeated exposure to the text. I think that's just one way to manage that, and just consistently reminding them to look for those bold words, those glossary terms, and remembering that I think less is more. I think in finding that balance of time, chunk out the textbook when you need to, and really hone in on those important points. So I think that's sort of one answer, that just my top tip of the iceberg sort of ways to help find balance in the classroom. But I did come with a couple of strategies today that are hopefully helpful to all learners in accessing texts that might be challenging for them to read. And one is using, this is sort of graphic organizer specific, but it's defining, deciding, and showing students how predicting leads to summarizing. And what I mean by that is that it's important when you're making predictions to give students enough information from the text to actually make a prediction. So that means have them look at the text, have them look at specific textual clues and cues such as captions, titles, that sort of thing, and then make informed predictions about what they're going to read. Then the next level is to have them go back and read their prediction after they've read the text and see if they were right, and have them adapt that or adjust that prediction to correctly reflect what they just read in the text. And again, if you think about that, we're exposing them to the text in a couple of different ways: that sort of overview look at it, then a deeper reading, and then going back and analyzing, hey, did I match up, my prediction match up with what I actually read? So we're giving them multiple chances to enter that text from different perspectives. So, and here's the example of what I mean. If we look at this selection from the textbook, you can see that this particular page has a title, it has some bold words, it has a subtitle, it has a caption, and it has an illustration. And I have a predicting organizer for informational text, and I kind of geared this organizer directly to those middle school grades. And what you want the students to do first, and of course you would model this with them, have them maybe doing it in whole group or in, at first, and then maybe doing it in partner work and small group, sort of giving them that responsibility, but definitely modeling it sort of in a whole group setting at first. But have them preview the features of the text. That might be the author, the illustrations, captions, titles, subheadings, bolded words, graphs, photos, that kind of thing. So if we look at this piece, we're only going to have them focusing on what we can see right here. And you would have them read, maybe read aloud the caption, maybe read aloud the subtitles, look at those bold words. Have them look at that picture, look at that photo, and what is that photograph showing us? And so what you might say is, Smoke from the smelters darkened the skies and killed plants and wildlife near industrial sites, but it also symbolized employment to people who needed to earn a living. Um, America Transformed is the title. When we look at this picture, you can talk about what you see. You see that smoke going in. It looks dirty. It looks like there's pollution going on. We know that that's bad. That's background knowledge that our students would already have. And so have them from what we've just read and looked at. Now make a prediction. What do we think we're going to learn in this article? And you would have them write their predictions here, maybe a few lines. Unfortunately, I can't write with this tool, but this is where you would write predictions. And one prediction you might write that they might say is, you know, industry was bad for America. It polluted the air. So they might write that here as what they think that this is what we're going to learn in this article. You might probe them to be a little bit more specific. Then what happens is you ask them to read the article. So this may be, it's a short piece. As the teacher, depending on if you think students can access it, you can read it aloud to them. You can have them read in partners. You can have them read it to themselves, whatever you're comfortable with that. Then you have them come back and look at their predictions and have them adjust their predictions to what they actually read in the text. And so say they did say up here, oh yes, the industry was bad for America because it polluted the skies. Well, that was sort of true, but part of that was not true because it wasn't only bad, it was also good, because down here it talks about how it was good for our economy. So we need to adjust this prediction. So give it a check there and then have them right here that adjusted prediction that reflects what was in the text. So this gives them, as you can see now, a couple of different times to go back to the text. On the next slide, I went ahead and presented an organizer that I filled in that I thought could be sort of something that middle school students would maybe come up with. And if you look at the black text here, the predictions were industry hurt America. Pollution was a problem. People made money, but environment was hurt. And what I wanted to show you here was that then I went ahead and adjusted this prediction and said, well, industry hurt America, but it also had positive effects, like it developed x-rays and it created jobs. Pollution was a problem. People did make money, but people were also hurt with the longer work hours and poor conditions. And you can see that I had to adjust that prediction as well. One thing I like to include at the bottom of an organizer when I'm talking about predicting and analyzing and what students read was anything that was unexpected. And one thing that I think students would talk about was maybe that many workers were immigrants in this particular article. It talked about that. They might say that. Now, this is where the summarizing comes in. After you've had students go back and correct their predictions up here and including what they found unexpected, they now can come down here to the bottom and write a summary using the words that they had up here. They now then write a summary about this section. And so that's how predicting, analyzing your prediction, going back to the text and reviewing it for accuracy can then lead you to a built-in summary of those key details from the text. And I find that for students this is really helpful in that sort of idea that it's okay to go back to the text and look for information and clarify information for themselves. A lot of times they try to think they have to have it all here in their head, but this is just that great reminder. Go back into the text. Is that what the text really told us? No, actually it said it was positive and negative. So let's clarify that and write that in our summary. So that's one sort of strategy. It's actually sort of two combined into one, predicting, moving into summarizing. What can happen then in a textbook like this is you can have certain sections that students have done this predicting activity, moved into summarizing, and sort of collect them. And then at the end of a unit, they'll have several summaries of the key ideas that they created for a unit, that they have those real key ideas from that unit there. And that can help them then do a further assignment or a writing assignment or continue on from there.